This is Johnny Bluestar. Welcome to Threshold, a global media event. Is the universe just a random dance of atoms, or is it a manifestation of a supremely intelligent architect? Can its purpose, or our purpose here on Earth, be adequately assessed? Can we commune with it, know its intentions, cooperate with its direction? Here, we define threshold as a gateway state of awareness, allowing mankind to cross into a place of real cognition. Threshold allows us to approach questions of higher reality through the door of experience, rather than mere belief. Welcome to Threshold, where we tear away the veil from commercial media, bringing our audience and participants into another realm of reality and enhanced communication. Welcome back to Threshold. The mission of this program has always been that the closer mankind gets to the core of his existence, which is a sacred connection to the divine presence, the closer we will become to the meaning of his existence and to the possibility of a just, sane, and prosperous society. It has been my observation that throughout history, there have always been men and women who have reached some level of this alignment with divinity. But there have also been people who have co-opted their message and their teaching for the sake of obtaining social and personal power over other people. That is why the various world scriptures often contain passages, thoughts, and assertions that seem to contradict the idea that contact with divinity produces a capacity for unconditional love, forgiveness, and guidance within. Although I believe the true message does allow for self-defense and for self-empowerment and enrichment, it is a path that moves forward without lust for power over others, enrichment at the expense of others, and the use of aggressive force to obtain one's objective. When we hear the teachings of the Inquisition that claims that certain people or teachings are somehow the exclusive carrier of God's favor, when brutal aggression is carried out against specific groups on the basis of this favor, we can suspect that somehow that a true spiritual teaching has been sabotaged. In my own spiritual search, I've always felt that among those teachings that seem to hold certain keys to an enlightenment about one's relationship to the divine presence, Masonry seemed to be a real candidate. To me, its symbols and rituals from an outsider's standpoint seem to convey something of a process of gradual enlightenment, in conformity with the kind of teaching of spiritual alchemy or transformation conveyed in all the religions of the world and often disguised in a letter or number code. Yet in regards to this teaching, it is apparent that many commentaries today will claim the opposite about Masonry, that its codes and symbols disguise an allegiance with darker powers, and even that it is a component of a grand scheme to control human population on this planet. This claim is so abundant on the internet in particular that I believe it is valuable and necessary to bring an opposing point of view, one by a person I know as an individual, as a patient, and a guest on my show, Dr. Hugo Rodier, MD, who from very early in his career as a physician focused on nutrition as the key foundations of good health and was always willing to put the truths about healing before the medical doctrines he encountered that ignored nutrition's role in health. Now much of medical science is catching up with his understanding of nutrition. In this show, Dr. Rodier is a committed Mason and a student of positive metaphysics who will help us to pull off the veil to some extent to expose the essence of Masonic philosophy and practice. Welcome to Threshold, Dr. Rodier.
Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure. And it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you again. Why don't you start by telling us first how you came across Masonry in whatever way you did, and why did you become actually involved?
Well, first of all, Johnny, I loved your intro. I hope I can live up to all that. But it's very true. Masonry is a bit controversial, and I'm glad to have a few minutes of your time to give an opposing, a contrasting point of view to all that.
Thank you.
Basically, I've been interested in Masonry since I was 14 years old. It's no secret that I wanted to become a priest at that point, but Mormonism came about and derailed those plans. I think it was a good thing at the time. As a young man, I needed some structured guidance. And so I caught wind of Joseph Smith being a Mason, and it was very intriguing to me because it wasn't brought up much in the Mormon Church. Then in my mid-30s, as I grew older and had studied just about every philosophy in the world, I began to see that I needed to move on. So I began to explore Masonry since I already had that connection. Fortunately, I wound up picking up the right books. Back then, no internet. That might have helped
Right.
in my quest for studying Masonry. Then it was very frustrating because, as you know, Masonry is by invitation only, and not that many Masons in Utah, where I ended up living after my medical training. So it's very frustrating to drive past the huge Masonic temple just down the block from the big Mormon temple in Salt Lake City. And one time going through the internet, I found that they had Masons had meetups, or a bunch of Masons would go to a cafe and welcome any non-Mason to hang out to learn about Masonry, and that's how I got plugged in. Not to my amazement, I was able to see that all the searching I'd done throughout my whole life, because I've been a searcher, a seeker, was Masonry. I just didn't know what to call it, and that was the most attracting point for me, the metaphysics, the esoterica of Masonry, which unfortunately has been kept a bit too secretive to my taste, but it's a generational thing. You know, after the war, the big war, Masons became very secretive for many reasons, but that's changing. Like I said, we have meetups now for interested people to come and check out Masonry. So things are changing, and so that's why I'm able to get on the radio with you and talk about Masonry openly.
Well, basically, a lot of the Masonic architecture and symbolism in Mormonism is similar, isn't it? Since Joseph Smith and his brother and other people in his family were connected with Masonry.
Yes, his father and Hiram, his brother, were very active. Joseph joined as well, but he had other fish to fry, as you know, so he wasn't as active as the males in his family. Now, Mormons will tell you that Joseph came to all the symbols and all the ceremonies and all that through his own revelations directly from God. And that's fine. You know, half of Masons in Utah are Mormons, so we respect that point of view. But other opinions will tell you that Joseph did learn a lot from the Masons. It becomes a matter of faith. If you believe that Joseph saw God and God told him all these things, then how can you argue with that? I don't want to. I don't feel the need for. I totally respect my Mormon brothers, if you will. So I don't see a need to hash it out and discuss whether Joseph saw God or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. I understand that. I live in Utah too.
Okay.
And I respect the Mormon faith. But I do think there are things that you can say that are quite interesting about the connection between Joseph Smith and Masonry.
Yes, for those who want to really delve into this, it's a very rich history. 2 years ago, a University of Utah professor published a terrific book, Joseph's Temples. I highly recommend it for those interested people because this professor, I forget his name, does a tremendous job, very impartial. Both Masons and Mormons are very happy with that book. And that would be an in-depth study of the whole issue if anyone is interested.
Yeah. Well, here's a quote about that connection. It's from a book called Refiner's Art, The Making of Mormon Cosmology. It says, Freemasonry provides a point of entry into this very complex story. As it has been in Vermont, Masonic fraternity was a dominant feature of the cultural landscape in Joseph Smith's Ontario County. The dense network of lodges and chapters help explain the Masonic symbolism that runs through the story of the discovery of the golden plates. Most obviously, the story of the discovery in a stone vault on a hilltop echoed the Enoch myth of Royal Arch Masonry, in which the prophet Enoch, instructed by a vision, preserved the Masonic mysteries by carving them on a golden plate that he placed in an arched stone vault marked with pillars to be rediscovered by Solomon in the years to come. So there is a definite interesting connection in the sort of life of Joseph Smith and the life of Enoch. That doesn't mean that doesn't obliterate the possibility of direct revelation, but it is interesting. And the last words, I believe, of Joseph Smith were a cry for help, which is the Masonic call for help. Isn't that true?
It is very true. I read that book. I think it's a good book, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. The whole thing about the golden plates, as you know, there's so much more that connects the two philosophies, if you will. There was a little bit of bad blood after Joseph's death, but that has been patched up as of 1984. The two organizations are in very good terms. As I said, half of Masons in Utah are Mormons. So the hatch is buried, and we kissed and made up, and it's all good in Utah.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, now, another thing that we're discussing, which is really much more known to the public than connections between Mormonism and Masonry, is some rather unsavory claims.
Yeah.
And these claims are sometimes so outrageous. They're funny, they're sort of funny. But I want to mention what I consider to be the main one.
Yes.
And the main one is the claim that Masonry, the kind of Masonry you're involved with, is there to create a new world order. And also that the higher degrees are basically for the purpose of wedding those members to a satanic cult in league with Lucifer and the powers of darkness. Now, I know that myself that this is has nothing to do with your type of Masonry. There may be other types of Masonry that have sort of cannibalized some of the symbols and such, and are quite negative. But what is this to the story of some kind of Masonic group trying to create a new world order today?
Well, let's start with that one. The other one we'll tackle in a minute, I hope. The whole story about the Illuminati and all that has its grains of truth. And it goes back to Germany when a bunch of philosophers felt that they were much better than everybody else and they should be on top teaching people how to live, how to run their lives. But that's nothing new, Johnny. You know that. It happens in history over and over again. And these people in Germany infiltrated Masonic lodges because it was the only outlet for free thinking. Think about it. In the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and all that, if you so much said anything to contradict the worldview monopolized by the Catholic Church, off with your head, or you were put on the stretcher and got taller real quick.
Right.
If not roasted in a fire pit, like Demolay in France.
Yes.
Etc. So lodges of Masons, true operative Masons who work with stone and all that, building cathedrals, since they had more education and they had the ear of popes and kings, sure, they wanted cathedrals and castles, began to organize to keep their building secrets. And at the same time, they organized themselves under morality rules, because without morality, without equality, how are you going to keep all those secrets of building together and get along? So lodges began to organize for many reasons, even for trade, if you will. Pretty soon, these men began to philosophize and adopt esoterica and mysticism from way back, which has always lied dormant. It's just part of man, part of our nature. So given the impetus and the seeds planted of democracy in these lodges, it began to attract people that were disenfranchised out there. The Illuminati type of people, they could not meet. They would also be sacrificed at the stake, if you will. And so they began to infiltrate Masonic lodges. It happens all the time. Okay, think about it. If you have a group of men that are willing to shelter you and call you brother, and you got some radical views that require some cocooning, you kind of gravitate to these lodges. There's no other game in town, or you lose your head. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I would think so, particularly in Germany of that era, which was the 18th century.
Exactly.
You're talking about Adam Weishaupt's organization called the Illuminati, which we'll get into a little bit more in a moment. Right now, we have to take a break.
Okay.
And, over the years, I've worked as a lyricist with master composer Edgar Ahrens. Many of our songs were specifically developed with Patricia Welch, a singer with an unusual capacity for diversity in her musical genres, but also with an uncanny grasp of the hidden beauty that a musical score and a set of lyrics can never match without the sensitive alignment with a great performer. Here's one of our songs, essentially a romantic song, that could easily be talking about a quest for a divine connection. It is called My Heart Is Ready.
The moon hangs low in the sky. I'm back again on this path. I scatter petals along down moonlight silver above. Can't believe that I'm here. Swore it would finally end. My heart's ready for you. Do I dare pretend? Who is sending these signs? Fireflies guiding my way. Are these just flurries of sparks in lightning's dazzling spray? Life seemed so very dark, fade to black at the bend. My heart's ready for you. Can we say on that?
Boots in Manhattan is a coming-of-age novel by Ray Boylan and Johnny Bluestar. It is about a young Tom Boots Raymond who grows up in New York in the 1940s who was a member of a street gang.
My friends and I were about to start our own game of stickball when Rabbit Lacey, the head of the Rattlers, came up to us and tried to move in on our game. We were called dwarves, the youngest members of this stupid gang.
Hey, Kevin, I need you to get some gloves and some stuff I left at my place.
No, this is our game.
Hey, are you my good little dwarf or what?
You've been calling me a dwarf since I was 6. We're not your personal slaves, pal.
Hey, what is this? A dwarf rebellion? All right, big guy, we ditched the dwarf thing. We make you guys regular rattlers.
No, it's too late.
He looked at Jay and me. We looked away. Rabbit was now angry and he pushed Kevin hard with the palms of his hand. Kevin tried to ram him in the stomach, but he stepped aside, throwing Kevin into the curb where he fell to the ground, bleeding profusely at the knee. Still, he managed to get up.
My street.
Kevin shouted at Rabbit, pointing at him with an angry index finger.
Find out more by Googling Boots in Manhattan, a 1940s coming-of-age novel, part 1 of the novel series The Foot Soldier by Ray Boylan and Johnny Bluestar. Google with the words Boots in Manhattan, Ray Johnny Kindle. That's Boots in Manhattan, Ray Johnny Kindle.
My company, New Galaxy Enterprises, is a California corporation specializing in the creation of media and promotional content. We are focused on original, innovative projects that are good for humanity. These projects could be nonfiction books or novels, fictional screenplays or documentary content, websites and website content, commercial advertising content for print, audio, or video products on the internet, television, or radio, musical scores for advertising, television, or film, video, audio editing, etc. We want to promote products and projects that support the environment, encourage a healthy experience in living, developing, nurturing, and useful technology, and offering platforms for positive, socially constructive entertainment or informative, transformative media. Our experience in creating a variety of products like this is rather vast, and we offer client-based and collaborative products, as well as the opportunity of active investors to join us in the creation and promotion of proprietary products, some of which are in latter stages of development. For more information, go to www.newgalaxyenterprises.com. That's www.newgalaxyenterprises.com. If you're interested in talking to us, just fill out the contact sheet and we will get back with you. Hi, we're back on Threshold with Dr. Hugo Rodier discussing the sort of essence of Masonry, and we've been contrasting it to people like those in the 18th century in an organization called the Illuminati that was founded by Adam Weishaupt that basically infiltrated different lodges and allowed a sort of development of an organization that bared a certain relationship to Masonry, but really had quite opposite principles. Is that correct, Doctor?
Yes. Now, specifically, after setting the background for the real answer, is that the Illuminati type of guys, having invaded the Masonic lodges in Germany, began to make a lot of noise that became embarrassing to the regular Masons who didn't have that agenda and were kicked out. Masonic lodges disenfranchised, or if you will, suspended the rights of those so-called Masons, so they were thrown out, in other words. The same thing happened in France. You know, people love to quote Robespierre and all those reign of terror type of revolutionaries who made a big mess of France at the time. People love to say they were Masons. Yes, it's true, but the same thing happened in France. Once they made a lot of noise, the Masonic lodges kicked them out. Think about it. One of the main tenets of Masonry is brotherly love, equality, and all those things. And Illuminati type of people, revolutionaries that are willing to chop off everybody's heads, that's the last thing they have in their minds. Morality, equality. And so, no, it runs totally opposite to Masonic basic principles of democracy. Further, if it were true that at the upper echelons of Masonry there were secret sub-organizations, if you will, that still harbor these take over the world type of things, it would have come out by now. It's just amazing how common sense does not prevail when people entertain these far-out ideas.
Yeah, you know, I'm thinking now of Christianity in its earlier stages. I mean, could you have, if there was any kind of goodness or truth in the teachings of Jesus, would those be the people who use Christianity as a foil for, say, the Crusades, or even as bad, the Inquisition? So you have a lot of takeovers, I think, in all types of organizations that have a spiritual basis.
Absolutely. Another, you know, I might as well bring it up because I'm sure somebody's thinking about it, is the Golden Dawn with this, what's his name?
Aleister Crowley, you mean?
Yes. Was he a Mason? Yes. But he was kicked out. I mean, the guy became quite radicalized with his far-out ideas. And so, look, just save yourself a time. Just about every organization, and I mean just about every organization, has had its roots in Masonry. Why? Because it was the only shelter from the big mother church. You see, I mean, it just, to me, to my mind, and it's very analytical, as you know, I've read a lot about these things, it just resonates with me, what I just told you.
Yeah. Well, I remember a story. W.B. Yeats, the famous poet and one of the greatest poets, I think, in the English language in the modern times. He was he was the head of the lodge in London, I believe, of the Golden Dawn. And when he heard that Aleister Crowley was going to come over to the lodge, he started to burn things. So, and Aleister Crowley truly would be an example of somebody who turned things like that quite upside down, and
Yes.
mixing sex and heroin with his rituals.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, so if anybody thinking we still do those things in our sacred meetings, no, absolutely not.
Well, let's get to another part of this, so we can just dispense with it, which is the claim that somehow Masonry is behind a New World Order. Now, there are many different theories about a New World Order. The Illuminati is a famous one, and the connection with Masonry is a negative side to it. You know, it's there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that there is a secret cabal. I think most Americans do believe that now.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what, Johnny? Is it a secret anymore that there is such a cabal? I mean, just reading the paper, everything that's going on screams at us that there's a shadow government. So
yes, I agree with that about this shadow government. The
Right.
thing is, people do take it to extraordinary lengths, including people like David Icke, who basically are saying that there are certain royal families that have a blood type that is related to their being reptilian
Right.
creatures from other dimensions who have somehow. I mean, I even heard that George W. had a skin graft because his skin was starting to scale like a reptilian.
yeah,
I have trouble with
Yeah.
that extent of that cabal, but that there is a group that is trying to basically create some type of a world order that is not beneficial to us. I think it's quite possible.
Yes, and in my way of thinking, it's out in the open. I mean, if you just look at the economics of our nations, it's all about bankers and who control the money. John Adams famously said, there is no freedom unless you understand how money works.
Uh-huh.
The average American doesn't know all the hanky-panky going on with fiat money and all that.
Yes.
So, having said that, are there some guys who are Masons in that cabal? Yes. Are there some guys that are Catholic in that cabal? Yes. Are there some Mormons that are part of that cabal? Yes. In other words, human nature being what it is, each one of those guys at the top, whatever you want to call it, will have some preferences about their philosophies and whatever floats their boat. So for me to say there are no Masons in it, it doesn't make sense, as it does not make sense to say that they're all Masons.
Well, I think that basically we're definitely in agreement about these things. It's unfortunate that the internet has two sides to it. One is a powerful way of liberating people through knowledge. Another way is a powerful way of deceiving people through disinformation.
Yes.
And through self disinformation too, with people who have basically, without thinking, have become followers of different points of view.
Well, let me say one more thing about this. It is totally documented. The main tenet of Masonry is equality, morality, brotherly love. And all the things we've been talking are far, far divorced from those basic Masonic tenets.
Well, I'll tell you, you have an interesting person who agrees with you. And, the Illuminati was in Bavaria, was founded in 1776. And this is probably, one of the main groups that perverted the Masonic doctrines and whose message leaked out to the masses. The order that was known as the Illuminati grew to prominence during George Washington's career. And as you know, George Washington was a very prominent Masonry. And I have a very interesting little statement about him through a book by Robert Hieronymus, and he quotes in it an 1848 manuscript. He says, when Washington was confronted with the story of these Illuminati penetrating the United States, he said he condemned them as self-created societies and dealt them a blow that led to their disappearance. When questioned about whether or not Illuminism had spread to Masonry in America, Washington answered that, quote, he did not believe that the lodges of Freemason in this country had as societies endeavored to propagate the diabolical tenet of the former Illuminati or the pernicious principles of the latter, Jacobinism. So George Washington agrees with you, and we'll get a little bit more into George Washington later on.
I hope so.
But I think right now let's focus now that we've discussed what Masonry is not. Perhaps we could try and discuss what it truly is. What actually is it, and where did it originate?
Well, Johnny, if you don't mind, there was a two-part. Your question was 2 parts.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
The other part was, do we worship Satan?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Well, let me tell you, he is the life of the party. When we go to lodges, he's always stirring things up. Life of the party. Yeah, that guy, old scratch. I tell you, Johnny, we laugh over these things. The whole thing about Masons worshiping Lucifer has been well documented by the most even-minded people that it was a hoax by a Frenchman, Toxol. It was debunked a few months after this idiot put out all these things out there. And yet, even though it's been debunked and put to rest, it comes up over and over and over again, misquoting Albert Pike and many other well-known Masons. So I can tell you, it is absolutely ridiculous. But, we have fun with it. The same with the Illuminati thing. We laugh. It's a great joke among us.
Now, I heard this story that really intrigues me, which is that the Knights Templar, who we've mentioned briefly before, were, of course, you were talking about Desmoulins. You were talking about the time that the French king basically decided to destroy the Knights Templars. Maybe you could go into a little bit about that background and tell us if there is any connection between the end of the Knights Templars and the formation of the Masons.
Sure. 1307, Friday the 13th, Philip le Beau, French king in ruins, and a king who had Gregory V imprisoned at Bordeaux, the Pope, the second Pope. It's called the Bordeaux imprisonment, where this Philip le Beau practically kidnapped and created his own Pope in Bordeaux to follow his own rules, began to lust after the money and the power of the Templars. And so the church and the state, if you will, concocted stories saying that the Templars were satanic worshipers, that they were doing all kinds of terrible things. Listen, money was involved. Okay, the minute you inject money in a conversation and a group of people is robbed of their money and it all goes to the church and the state, you have to question a whole lot of things about those stories. Now, were the Templars prototypes of modern Mormons? Yes and no. There are 2 schools of thought in Masonry, the Authentics and the Romantics. The Authentics claim that modern Masonry began in 1717 when it was formally organized in London, putting a few existing lodges together. The Romantics say, no, it's been around since Adam, if you will, and it just goes into hiding, if you will, and it comes back in another form, another reincarnation, then it goes back under what? Persecution. So did the Templars entertain some basic ideas of the perennial philosophy, that philosophy that is very, very basic? I'm sure they did, as many other groups have had in the past. Is there a connection between the Templars and the modern Masons unbroken? No. Am I romantic? I say, as you imply in your intro, that God speaks to men's souls in the quietness of our hearts with the same truth, whether we live in Argentina or China in the Middle Ages or today or with Adam, it is all the same. Why should it be different? So whether the Templars did this handshake or that salute or not, whether they had the same symbols as we did or not, I can assure you that Masonry strives to get the very basic symbolism of very basic truths. So as such, I believe there are connections to all those august groups of antiquity that have entertained more esoteric ideas that only a few understand because only a few have pure hearts.
Well, I guess the story I'm relating about Knights Templars was that there was an actual transmission to certain people while they were imprisoned, so that the teachings could go on. And of course, they couldn't. They didn't want to express themselves as the Knights Templars anymore, but they needed a different sort of cover identity.
Yes, there's many connections to the Knights of St. John, the Hospitallers, and then many other organizations that are said to have been Templars who just changed their names.
Right.
Yeah, and some of them will tell you, oh, they came to America, they went to Scotland, they went to Portugal, they went to Spain, Madagascar. Yeah, it's probably true. I mean, these people scattered like rats from a sinking ship. I mean, what are you going to do? And so I'm sure there are remnants of Templar remnant throughout the world if we care to look deep enough. But, you know, Johnny, the point I was making is that somebody on top of a mountain, totally isolated, if he or she truly seeks, will get the same ideas, the same connection with that big consciousness that many call God, and no matter what background, what situation, because such is the nature of humankind. I believe we're totally connected to divinity. So the symbols, as good as they are sort of a representation of deeper truths that are available to all mankind, whether they're Masons or not.
I completely agree with that. And I think it's important to realize that we don't have to know the exact historicity of these various religious traditions or try to find and, you know, look for them and think that finding them is going to be a real critical element to our salvation. No, it's listening and becoming and being able to commune with that presence. We're going to go for a break now, and we'll be right back with more on the true nature of Masonry with Dr. Hugo Rodier. Edgar Aaron's a Russian composer, and I have worked together for years. Very happy that Edgar has allowed my company, New Galaxy Enterprises, to be a contact point for his work. Let's hear a little about him. I've worked with Russian composer Edgar Aaron for quite a few years, building an inventory of songs, many of which feature singer-performer Patricia Welch. We will soon be releasing these songs, components of an album and a musical in progress called Hadley's Castle. When Edgar and I first got together, I was amazed by the brilliance of his musical scores created for movies, TVs, and animations. Here is a sample of the work he did on the Russian TV series, available now on Amazon, called The Secret Agent's Memoir, which had 2 seasons. This score is called Escape and was created for the first season. I am very pleased to say that Bridge of Light Productions, a division of New Galaxy Enterprises, is proud to be the contact point for television and film companies seeking information about this amazing composer's work. If you are in the entertainment business and wish to know more, contact me at johnnybluestar@gmail.com. That's johnnybluestar@gmail.com.
It is the 15th century. El Tesoro de Cielo, a Spanish treasure ship, sends a scouting expedition to a strange island. Golden statues surrounding them prove the enormity of their find. Suddenly, hordes of ghoulish creatures with scaly green flesh and skeletal wings descend upon them from the sky.
What do you think of this, Rufio?
These creatures are fragile, Captain. We can take them with our swords.
They seem supernatural. Who knows what powers they possess?
Fallen angels weakened by their treason.
My God! Are you saying they're Nephilim, the devil's host?
I'm saying, whatever they are, we can take them. Do any of you cowards dare join me?
Up against sharp knife-like nails and hideous fangs, the men's swords rip into slimy green flesh. Though black blood pours copiously from their half-naked bodies, the creatures miraculously persist. Can the crew survive this bloody, cursed battle?
Find out more by Googling The Thrice Born, a new sci-fi supernatural novel by Carlos Lopez Avery and Johnny Bluestar. Google with the words Carlos Johnny Kendall, The Thrice Born. That's Carlos Johnny Kendall, The Thrice Born.
New Galaxy Enterprises is a media company specializing in wide-ranging content like novels, nonfiction books, screenplays, commercial advertising, web content, etc. One of our most esteemed providers is illustrator Robert W. Zalo. I work on all my most important projects like book covers, logos, web design elements with Robert. As an illustrator, he worked on the Ignatz-nominated comic book, The Expert's Guide to Killing Things That Go Bump in the Night. His skills encompass advertising, magazine illustrations, gaming, comic books, TV production, and scenic painting. His clients include Comcast, Adelphia, Haven Talent, ForceWorks, High Octane Theater, Star Creative Advertising. If you wish to contact Robert, go to JohnnyBlueStar.com and let me know. That's JohnnyBlueStar.com. For artist, illustrator Robert Zalo, an essential component of all the work we do. Maybe he can help you too. This is Johnny Bluestar back with Dr. Hugo Rodier talking about the essence of Masonry. We've already talked about some of the difficulties in understanding what Masonry really is and some of the distortions. And we've also talked about some of the possible legacies of Masonry, but also the importance that Masonry believes that there is a possibility of communing with God through one's own consciousness. And because of that, the reality of the tradition of Masonry isn't as important as its living presence. Is that correct, Doctor?
Absolutely.
Well, tell us something about the principal tenets of Masonry. What are its sort of intellectual foundations, spiritual foundations?
We like to think that it's a perennial philosophy, meaning very basic concepts that people have known since the foundation of the world. And before a Mason is initiated, he hears a little lecture, and it's no secret, it's on the internet, and it begins kind of like this. Masonry is far removed from everything that is trivial, selfish, and ungodly. It is a beautiful system of morals, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. Its principal tenets are brotherly love, relief, and truth. It is founded upon an unbiased foundation of an unfeigned belief in the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of men, and the immortality of the soul, quote unquote.
That's very interesting, yes.
It's loaded with meaning. So after a man becomes a Mason, we dissect that to the nth degree. Of course, most of it is done by the Mason himself. We don't like to spoon feed people, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Okay. Well,
so
go ahead.
That's a very basic definition of Masonry. There's a lot more which we can unwrap.
Well, so what would you say is the most important core concept of Masonry within those tenets you mentioned?
It all boils down to the Greek saying that we find on what's this place in Greece, carved on top of the temple, know thyself.
Gnothi.
Right, to know thyself and to know God. And in Masonry, we symbolize that with our all the noise we make about the lost word, which basically is a way of saying mankind has a hard time understanding who we truly are, who God truly is, and our relationship with him, her, or it. And so everything that we talk about is geared to that understanding. We call it traveling east. And it's when we find out who we are, who God is, there's just no way for any immorality, any desire to hurt people in your heart anymore. Your heart is filled with a need to love others, to understand others, to be charitable, to be respectful, because we see divinity in us and our fellow man.
And this is more than just an intellectual understanding.
Oh, absolutely.
This is an experience of
Right.
a certain level of consciousness.
Exactly. And so, we don't openly discuss these things, even in lodges. And I'll tell you why. Because each man is at a different level. You see, we have Jewish people, we have Islam, we have Sufis, we have Baptists, Catholics, Mormons, Unitarians, Buddhists, Hindus, and Masonry. So, if we begin to spell out what, say, I perceive to be this consciousness, the guy who next to me who feels that God is a white guy with a beard floating on some cloud is just not going to be comfortable with what I just said. And you know what? I respect my brothers who have that idea of divinity. Hey, if it floats your boat, if that's how you interpret the symbols, more power to you. The bottom line is how we end up treating each other, fellowship.
Well, I think that there is a progression, and it is important to provide people with some of these ideas so that they can connect to the rest of them. And ultimately, they're going to have to connect on their own.
Exactly. We would like to spell out all these things a lot more in Lodge. So we end up talking very little about particular dogmas, even political parties, because it's the nature of most men to get offended if somebody has a different opinion. So this is how Masonry has become so democratic, is by dealing with symbols. Take, for instance, a very dear symbol that we have, Hiram Abiff.
Uh-huh.
Of course, he gets killed and then he's resurrected and all that business. Now, any Catholic or any Christian out there will immediately say, oh, that's a symbol for Jesus Christ. You know what? You're right. But so is the guy sitting across the room from you who feels that's a symbol of Osiris or a symbol of Thor or a symbol of Buddha, etc., etc. So imagine if any one of us was to get up and say, hey, this is the way you need to interpret Hiram Abiff. No, we don't do that. So we talk in common denominators, which at once is a strength in Masonry and a weakness, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But, what I like to tell people about this, Johnny, is really simple, because we are mostly Christians. We're mostly Bible type of people, right? Now, recall what Jesus did at the Sermon on the Mount. He gathered the masses and talked about very basic principles of getting along, which are well known to all of us. Then, as the crowds dispersed, he said to the apostles, come with me, I will teach you the secrets. And so, as much as it might sound preposterous or self-serving, we believe that the symbols we have speak of those mysteries that are only given to those who truly seek. They don't need to be Masons. They don't need to be Catholics. They can just be sitting on top of a mountain all by themselves and get it. And so how do you teach those things that most people are not ready to receive? And so we do it with symbols.
Yeah, well, I understand that. I know because I've gone through a lot of different spiritual practices, and the ones that perhaps are the most important to me are ones that would be very difficult to convey to other people. But they are similar to what I conceive to be a lot of symbolism in Masonry.
Oh, absolutely, because Masonry, when I said that just about every philosophy has come out of Masonry, I didn't mean to say the modern organized Masonry 1717. I spoke of that perennial philosophy. Huxley has a beautiful book about this, Perennial Philosophy, which I highly recommend it. There's not one word about Masonry in it. Huxley goes for those very ancient symbols and concepts that, again, we call perennial philosophy, and develops that idea very well. Well, I would like to think, on a personal level, that Masonry symbolizes the perennial philosophy, and from it, all philosophies and religions have sprung.
Do you think in the higher orders there's more of a specific understanding conveyed, or sort of the idea, the practicum behind the theory, or is it basically left out?
Great question. Johnny, I'll answer that, but let me take off my Masonic hat and just speak as Hugo Rodier.
Okay.
I believe that the whole universe, everything in it, is a manifestation of the mind of God, or consciousness. You and I, Johnny, are part of it. Our egos are so strong because we need them to get from point A to B and to eat food and go to work, that we forget this basic perennial idea. And so once we become aware of who we are, what God is, and to me it's all one ball of wax, one gigantic consciousness, if you will, there's no need to know anything because you are it. So all concepts are gone. It's what the thou talks about. It's the very concept of the thou. The thou needs no words, because when you get to this basic understanding, all concepts, all principles, all dogmas, all ideas are gone. You just exist one thing only, unity, the unity of consciousness. So why would we need concepts when there's just one thing? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, yes.
So that's my take on it. Now I find those ideas in Masonic symbols, but Joe Blow across the street, who believes in Joseph Smith, will not agree with me. And yet he's a Mason. We're both Masons in good standing, and we get along.
I do think that some of the teachings that I'm aware of, what I would call teachings of spiritual alchemy, have to do with the restructuring of the human personality to more or less conform to divine essence. In other words, breaking down, even though one has an awareness of a higher consciousness, doesn't mean that the false ego isn't still largely dominating one's consciousness and one's personality. So I do think there may be some aspects of Masonic symbolism, or at least the symbolism I'm aware of, in which there is a teaching to help break down this very recalcitrant aspect of ourselves.
Well, Johnny, I believe you just said the same thing. In the second degree of Masonry, we talk about learning these ideas degree by degree, step by step. And so I was talking about the ultimate outcome. But to getting there, yes, we need to come to terms with these ego idea, which, in my opinion, cannot be fought. It's there to get you to point A, from point A to point B, and to feed you, and to work, and all those things. Just like having an arm. We can't say, I don't need this arm anymore. We need the ego. Because we're in a terrestrial material world where that's how we get from point A to B. And I believe you're right, that as we begin to see that's all the ego is, and begin to look into our true identity, and that happens to people immediately, instantaneously. I can tell you I'm not one of those. I'm just fighting the battle, traveling east like the rest of mankind, step by step. So yes, but that's why we have our symbols, and we hang out and we study and all that. It's a gradual process. I was talking of the ultimate outcome.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll return to this part of the conversation in just a few moments. But I think another thing we're going to do is touch on our friend George Washington again, and how that Masonry might have worked at the beginning of our republic. We'll be right back after a brief break. This is Johnny Blue Star. Welcome to Threshold, a global media event. Is the universe just a random dance of atoms, or is it a manifestation of a supremely intelligent architect? Can its purpose, or our purpose here on Earth, be adequately assessed? Can we commune with it, know its intentions, cooperate with its direction? Here, we define threshold as a gateway state of awareness, allowing mankind to cross into a place of real cognition. Threshold allows us to approach questions of higher reality through the door of experience, rather than mere belief. Welcome to Threshold, where we tear away the veil from commercial media, bringing our audience and participants into another realm of reality and enhanced communication. This is Johnny Blue Star. We're back on Threshold Radio with Dr. Hugo Rodier, a medical doctor who believes that the foundation for good medicine depends on an understanding of nutrition. Dr. Rodier is also a Mason and is sharing today his insights as to the essential teachings of true Masonry. We will now continue with our first hour's discussion. Now, a lot of times we hear how religion was the fundamental basis for the founding of America. But when you go deeper, there seems to be a connection between Masons and the Masons themselves and the founding of our country. I've heard that 1/3 of initiations during the Revolution took place in Washington's tent. Here's an excerpt from a book called America's Secret Destiny by Robert Hieronymus. Quote, "The underlying philosophy of Masonry, the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God, was the foundation of political, religious, social, and educational reform, which was opposed by the monarchies of Europe and ecclesiastical authorities as well. Washington's leadership and involvement with the craft gave him the confidence that America's military secrets were safe. His involvement in Masonry as master of the lodge provided him with more than confidence, because the lodge's rituals function was to elevate the participants' consciousness. A group of Freemasons experienced the rituals and initiations in an altered state of awareness, provided the internal strength and fortitude for them to grasp the importance of the American revolutionary experience and its meaning for humanity as a whole. Thus, the Atlantic Ocean, guerrilla tactics, and King George's conflicts contributed to the defeat of the English army, but so did the Masonic experience. Provided Washington with the will and capacity to defeat King George when the world expected America's defeat." That's the quote.
Beautiful quote. Thanks for sharing.
Do you feel that there is an alteration in consciousness that occurs because of participation in these rituals? And
Yes, we are really into ritual.
do you believe that there is something to the statement that there's an altered state of consciousness that results from participation in the rituals and exchanges of brotherhood within the lodge?
Absolutely. I can go by my own experience and talking to other brothers. Yes, I often hear the same, but when I was initiated, I couldn't sleep that night. And I wish I could relate all those metaphysical thoughts that came through my mind. But basically, yes, if one goes in with the right attitude, of course, that's always the state of the recipient that's most important. That person will accrue a whole lot of benefits. Our rituals are steeped in antiquity. They're there for many reasons. And again, they're not secret. You can look them up on the internet if you want, this day and age. But let me tell you, ritual is deep in the heart of man. And a lot of modern people don't understand that. And it's a loss. I mean, think of the rituals of men becoming men by hunting or going to war and all those things, might sound primitive, but they really were rituals of initiation of a young man into adulthood. And of course, they're no longer that violent, but a lot of people lack that anymore. And so ritual is how we take steps towards spiritual development. And one of them is becoming a man. As you said, we need to step by step reach our potential. And of course, we have 3 degrees of ritual, where a person becomes a master mason or a 3rd-degree mason. And you can stop there and study all the things that those 3 degrees give you in regular lodge meetings. But there are other masons who want to go further, and they join other sub-Masonic organizations, if you will, like the York Rites or the Scottish Rites, and they get into more ritual, and more experiences like that are available to those who want to go further. But the 3 degrees have everything. It just that it's very veiled because of the things we talked about before. We feel that a man has to do a little bit of work and progress at his own pace.
One of the things that I found out, I was looking for a certain kind of teaching, and I came across a book called the Apocalypse Unveiled, and by James Morgan Price. And in this book, it described the kind of code which were related to astrological and alchemical symbolism. One of the aspects of this code was that the name Jesus in Greek, in actual Greek language of the time, Koine Greek, where they did not have Arabic letters, came out to the number of those letters came out to 888. And interestingly enough, the number of the cross, which is stauros, which in Koine Greek, there was no longer the digamma that was equal to 6 that existed in earlier forms of Ionic and Attic Greek. It came to 777. Now, within the context of the Revelations of St. John, the most famous number is 666. So these are kind of important repeating decimals, and you wonder why they actually existed. Well, I believe that they existed because there is a teaching within Christianity which is very, in my opinion, very Masonic based, and is and was probably taught by Jesus, but is totally lost, as those documents often have been doctored, so that there's not very much left of them unless they're expressed purely symbolically. Not just because you want to protect people from disagreeing on things, but also because of the dangers of being uncovered by the wrong people and, going to the stake, like we were talking about before.
I absolutely agree. I'm sure you're familiar with the rings and the lapel pins that some Masons wear, where you see the square on the compasses.
Yeah.
And you know what letter it's in the middle of it?
G.
Which stands for geometry.
Uh-huh.
So geometry and Masonry were anciently synonymous words. And we really get into geometry and numerology, not in an open fashion because of the things we talked about, but for those Masons who want to dig and really like to get into the things as I see you are doing, there are mountains, mines of wisdom buried beneath the surface. And I'm one of those Masons who delights in all that. And you're absolutely right. The numerology of Masonry is astounding. We look, the whole thing about the planets and the spheres and the universe, as above, so below. It's so true. In fact, that's one of the meanings of the square on the compasses, as above, so below. As you know, Masonry, in its finest philosophical reincarnation, is very Kabbalistic and hermetic.
Uh-huh.
And if you know what those things mean, then just we can talk about this all night long.
Well, we'll be talking about it more when we come back, because we don't want to leave this part of it out. So we'll be back in just a few moments on Threshold Radio. This song was the second song Edgar Ahrens and I created for an album for Patricia called Hadley's Castle.
The whistling wind makes me shiver. Its gray shrieks make me cry. I remember the joyous glee stole from my eyes. I remember that day when the wind swept away life's dear comfort and warmth and that bitter autumn day. Maple leaves curl and quiver and flail in the air. The rude act of dying paints red brown everywhere. But I know harsh enchantment can't turn the love astray, because love never withers. Love never withers.
This is Johnny Bluestar. I've worked as a lyricist with Patricia Welch for over 5 years, along with Russian composer Edgar Ahrens, a friend and colleague. Her ability as a singer is simply amazing. She brings a unique and dramatic flair to every song she sings. Over the next few months, we shall be releasing a number of these songs, part of an album called Hadley's Castle. Meanwhile, Patricia has been busy creating a super enjoyable collection of classic standards in an exciting 46-song, 3-CD collection.
Music for Great Entertaining introduces Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia Welch. 3 hours of continuous music. 46 of the all-time classic standards, spanning decades of hit songs. Going to a friend's home for dinner? Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia also makes the perfect hostess gift. This 3-CD compilation is the perfect background music that sets just the right mood for any dinner party.
I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy.
To purchase this album, just go to patriciawelch.com/CD. That is patriciawelch.com/CD. You won't be disappointed.
The following is from West Side Warrior, the memoir of Ray Boylan, a Korean War veteran and crime fighter. He was there fighting in the world's coldest battlefield when the Chinese communists invaded.
Desperate squad members ran past our foxhole yelling, "Get the hell out of here, there's too many of them!" Again, we saw the Chinese soldiers charging in with opium-induced mindlessness, oblivious of our bullets. Again, we heard the bugles and whistles. Climbing out of our foxhole, Bob dropped 2 hand grenades behind us, and I threw one over my shoulder. Bullets whizzing by our heads, Bob and I became bolts of lightning flashing across the mountainside. Like a hideous film, desperate scenes like this played out on the Tokong Pass for 3 days. Sometimes I played in the scene. Sometimes I could only watch and wonder if it were real, or if I'd be suddenly jolted out of my trance by an RKO usher saying, "Hey, did you kids sneak in here?"
To acquire this book, Google westsidewarrior.boylan.kindle. Boylan is spelled Boylan. That's Westside Warrior, Boylan, Kindle.
Welcome back to Threshold. Today's topic is the essence of true Masonry, and we're with Dr. Hugo Rodier, MD, who is sharing some of his experience and insights into the reality of this incredible tradition, which is so vastly misunderstood today. We were talking about some of the symbolism, both numerical and astrological and so forth, that exists in Masonry. And I want to give you a very fanciful concept, okay?
All right.
See, the Masons are really talking about building, right? And perhaps the most iconic aspect of that building is the building of a temple.
King Solomon's temple.
Mm-hmm. And that is where, how's that connected to the Knights Templars?
Well,
you didn't tell that story, so why don't you tell that story?
Can I tell a story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, about 9 French knights from the part of France where my family comes from, Albigensia, the Cathars.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting in itself.
Yes, and it gets better because I'm very proud of what I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
These 9 knights decided to go to Jerusalem, who had just been taken over by the Crusades, and it was being governed by a French king. So they got up to Jerusalem and said to the king, hey, let us guard the roads from here to France and the rest of Europe so that pilgrims wanting to come and see the Holy Land will be protected. And so the king said, sure, what do you ask in return? Well, we just want to serve God and King, but let us stay at the temple. The temple is Solomon, which was in ruins, and we'll just hang out there. A lot of people think they had ulterior motives because they wanted to dig around the ruins, hence the name Templar. It turns out that my name, Rodier, in French means road keeper.
Ah.
And the coat of arms, and you can look it up, the Rodier coat of arms, is a Templar, Templar coat of arms. It has a chevron, which means protection. It has a line, which means serving for protection. It has 3 castles, which is a Templar symbol. And it has 3 black heads, which is Islam people were felt to be darker than the lily white Caucasians in Europe. So I have a Templar coat of arms. Now, as you know, Johnny, Templars became very rich because of this trafficking back and forth. They started banks where you could carry a note from Jerusalem to France, not money, and that note would be redeemed when you got to France, so you decreased your chances of losing your fortune on the way. So Templars, as you know, founded the banks of Europe.
Right.
And it turns out that Rodier was the founder of the Bank of France. And so I'm very familiar with the whole story.
Oh, Rodier, one of your ancestors, right?
Yeah, Rodier was my father, who was a Frenchman. So I'm very proud of that heritage. But I still believe what I told you. I don't think we have a clear connection between those Templars and modern Masonry. But I think we do when it comes to a spiritual connection of like-minded men.
Don't you think it's peculiar that 9 men would think they could protect
all
these travelers coming? I mean, right. It just seems like where they wanted to be was that temple, because once they got there, they excavated it, didn't they?
Exactly. So that's why I laughed at the beginning and I told you about ulterior motives. Now, they became strong enough where they carried out that mission, but not 9 guys at the beginning. So, yeah, a lot of historians think that their main motive was to tool around the temple ruins.
And what do you think they found there?
You know, a lot of, this is my opinion, okay?
Okay.
It's like the whole thing about the quest for the Holy Grail. A lot of people think, oh, it's the blood of Jesus, Jesus' descendants. Other people think, oh, it's just riches of untold vastness, you know, a big treasure. You know, Johnny, I think these are all allegories of the lost word. The concept that we live in darkness and have forgotten who we are, who God is. Isn't that knowledge the most precious to be had?
Yes, but you know, it may be also true that this is one claim, okay, that what they found was connected with, say, the true history of Jesus' teaching.
Yes.
Which we know has been, well, not we know, some of us believe, has been ruthlessly suppressed.
Oh, absolutely. But that's what I mean by the lost word, because I believe exactly what you said.
And perhaps these men, in their own way, try to revive and continue this tradition, but somewhat secretively. Because
exactly. And look where it got them.
Eventually, though, they did become quite successful along that road.
They did, and you know, most of them had a vow of poverty, so it's not like they were swimming in gold coins, you know. Yes, they did have a lot of money, and they used it for good for the most part. I mean, whenever you get money injected into any organization, it's going to be hanky-panky because we're men. We're mortals. We're imperfect. But I think the vast majority of the Templars were committed to poverty. I totally agree with you that the real treasure was the knowledge that you speak of, which we symbolize by the lost word.
Well, to just add to that little mysterious thing that we're talking about, and the possibility of other interpretations, is there is actually a reality TV program on which purports that the Templars not only made their money through banking, but through piracy, or at least through a connection to piracy.
I saw that. Walter, what's his name on the History Channel, Scott Walter, made a connection between the Templars after they got dispersed. They flee to Portugal, and from there they went to Madagascar and became...
Right, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I saw that. And no, that rings true to me. You know, as above, so below. We live...
Exactly.
Yeah, we live by spiritual guidelines, but you know, we got one foot on the ground. I hope we do, because when we have neither foot on the ground, we become pretty flaky. So I'm a pragmatist and also a romantic. I strive for balance, which is a very Masonic thing to say.
Well, we're going to get a little bit more in depth into what that balance might be from an esoteric point of view in just a few minutes. We'll be right back. One of our most frequent guests and a regular participant in our roundtable discussions is attorney novelist Kenneth Eade. Here's a clip from his novel, Terror on Wall Street. We use this novel as a springboard for discussing what would happen in a potential financial crisis in one of our programs available on www.thresholdradio.com. Here it is.
It was like the beginning of the end of the world. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. That's what the survival hawks had said, but everyone had always thought they were crazy. Now, she realized they were right, as she watched the mobs of people looting the streets of Chicago, smashing windows and breaking down doors, as the police stood by in their riot gear, doing nothing about it. The sky was already a hazy brown, probably from all the fires. She could hear the fire engine sirens and had seen plumes of smoke from all over the city on her taxi ride from the University of Chicago. Keep enough cash in case of emergency. Even her economics professor, Harry Mason, who was a relatively conservative buy-and-hold investor, had advised her to keep cash just in case, and to also have some hard assets in a portfolio. Shirley Baxter, called Snooky by most of the people who knew her, looked out the window of the cab at the chaos outside that used to be the streets of Chicago. Some people were carrying huge bottles of water, and some were rolling shopping carts filled with food. Others were stealing the spoils from each other. A rock suddenly hit the side of the cab with a loud clank, just missing the window, and Snooky ducked down. "You don't want to go out there," said the cab driver, a rough and tough type with a pack of cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve of his t-shirt. "Will we make it?" "Oh, you'll make it to the airport all right. I don't know about your plane. Where are you headed?" "Washington. I'm supposed to be in a group who's testifying before the Senate Finance Committee." "Well, you tell them for me that they've screwed everything up. Excuse my French, but there's no other way to say it."
Here is an example of Different Worlds, an instrumental by Edgar Ahrens. I've worked with Russian composer Edgar Ahrens for quite a few years, building an inventory of songs, many of which feature singer-performer Patricia Welch. We will soon be releasing these songs, components of an album and a musical in progress called Hadley's Castle. When Edgar and I first got together, I was amazed by the brilliance of his musical scores created for movies, TVs, and animations. Here is a sample of the work he did on the Russian TV series, available now on Amazon, called The Secret Agent's Memoir, which had 2 seasons. This score is called Escape and was created for the first season. I am very pleased to say that Bridge of Light Productions, a division of New Galaxy Enterprises, is proud to be the contact point for television and film companies seeking information about this amazing composer's work. If you are in the entertainment business and wish to know more, contact me at johnnybluestar@gmail.com. That's johnnybluestar@gmail.com.
Boots in Manhattan is a coming-of-age novel by Ray Boylan and Johnny Bluestar. It is about a young Tom Boots Raymond who grows up in New York in the 1940s, who was a member of a street gang.
My friends and I were about to start our own game of stickball when Rabbit Lacey, the head of the Rattlers, came up to us and tried to move in on our game. We were called dwarves, the youngest members of the stupid gang.
Hey, Kevin, I need you to get some gloves and some stuff I left at my place.
No, this is our game.
Hey, are you my good little dwarf or what?
You've been calling me a dwarf since I was 6. We're not your personal slaves, pal.
Hey, what is this? A dwarf rebellion? All right, big guy. We ditched the dwarf thing. We make you guys regular rattlers.
No, it's too late.
He looked at Jay and me. We looked away. Rabbit was now angry and he pushed Kevin hard with the palms of his hand. Kevin tried to ram him in the stomach, but he stepped aside, throwing Kevin into the curb where he fell to the ground, bleeding profusely at the knee. Still, he managed to get up.
My street.
Kevin shouted at Rabbit, pointing at him with an angry index finger.
Find out more by Googling Boots in Manhattan, a 1940s coming-of-age novel, part 1 of the novel series The Foot Soldier by Ray Boylan and Johnny Bluestar. Google with the words Boots in Manhattan, Ray Johnny Kindle. That's Boots in Manhattan, Ray Johnny Kindle.
This is Johnny Bluestar back with Hugo Rodier discussing the essence of true Masonry. And we've been talking about alchemical symbolism. And I'm going to present you with a very, I would say, controversial concept. You see, remember how Jesus says, the temple will be rebuilt in 3 days. You remember that? He's talking about his body.
Right.
Well, some people might say that the purpose of the builders of the temple is to create a different form, a different kind of physical existence, which is more harmonious with the divine nature, which is symbolized, like you've mentioned, by such things as particularly like the Tree of Life.
The Kabbalistic Tree of Life.
As an example.
Right.
Do you think it's possible that the goal of some of these spiritual practices is actually to create a body that's sort of like the body of resurrection that Jesus had, which basically is not geared totally to it's not pegged to the material world, so that it operates out of a different realm or plane of existence?
Yes and no. Let me explain. I think the danger here is that we take all these symbols and we translate them in material terms, like we talked about the Templar treasure. And it could be the blood of Christ. It could be some bunch of gold cups and coins and pearl necklaces. But I believe, like you do, that the real treasure is this lost knowledge. So I believe, like I said about an hour ago, that our true goal is to become one with God and mankind. Now, as to what shape that takes, do we get these light bodies? Do we get these ethereal bodies? You see, those are all concepts that try to say the same thing in terms that are more material. Because once we become united with this consciousness, which is what the allegories talk about of returning to the presence of God, there is no need to want to try to figure out what that will be like. I can tell you, Johnny, I have no clue what that will be like because I don't understand. My mind is too small to understand the wholeness of the universe and the consciousness of God. In essence, the word is lost. But I have hope that I will come to know as to how that will take place, what kind of shape that will be. I believe is pure speculation fueled by wanting to speak spiritual truth in material terms. So I believe that's where you inject all these ideas about bodies of light or transcending to a higher sphere. And some guys get really wound up on this and will tell you that we'll be taken up in UFOs and take off into some planet or star far away where God lives. I don't know. I believe that there's a danger here where speculation. Look, Moses said it best, to the unknown God, meaning that we really don't know, and to pretend to know, it's one thing. To speculate is another. As long as we can speculate with respect for one another's ideas, I think it's all fun, and I think that's what we're doing here. But to be so locked into those ideas where you truly believe that's it.
Well, I don't think that, when I first got involved in spiritual practices, I believe there was a specific teaching, and I believed, in fact, there was a specific teaching in Christianity. That wasn't the heart of what I was doing, but it was part of it. It was part of my search.
Yeah.
And eventually I found it. And once I found it, I began to practice it, which I practiced for probably something like 40 years. And I find that the specifics of the alchemical teaching, particularly the way I use it primarily, is to harmonize the various tendencies of the ego that obliterate the possibility of really being transparent to higher consciousness. Let me give you an example. Like, for instance, if your tendency when somebody bothers you or says something to you that's nasty is to get back at them, right? To get back at them. So you're going to get back at them, and you're going to use an energy that's sort of like this. Well, part of that energy, in my understanding, is the energy of Mars. And a part of it is the energy of Jupiter. Disengaged from the other planetary energies, like, for instance, the energy of, let's say, love, which I'm just making this sort of simplified, is Venus. So you have parts of your personality that are disengaged from this whole pattern where Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, the moon, the sun are all engaged together symbolically, there's a song by Leonard Cohen that talks about, it doesn't talk about the lost word, it talks about the lost chord. But it's sort of like that our personalities are sort of like potentially a very harmonious set of tones that are sort of like a chord, but much more complex. And that the teaching is of some of these things, like the Tree of Life, is to reintegrate these other planetary energies so that one becomes harmonious with the wholeness of the Tree of Life, which would be like the essence of personality that's harmonious with the divine presence.
I agree with all that. That's why I brought up the Kabbalistic, hermetic nature of Masonry, which is best expounded on by Albert Pike. And so that's why I love the Scottish Rites. I spent a lot of time with the Scottish Rites on my 32nd degree Mason. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. My caution is that some guys in Masonry don't get into that and are satisfied with the fraternity part of the organization, and they just hang out. I respect that. So they can be very good Christians or Buddhists, and they're uncomfortable with this type of stuff. And some Masons don't like Albert Pike. But hey, we tolerate each other. But let me go back to what you said. I wholeheartedly believe that. In fact, we get into a lot of esoteric in Masonry, and we talk about the planets, the influence of the planets. That's why I said, as above, so below. So, but I go back to the point I made before, that once we see that as above, so below, it's also an artificial construct because we're all one big consciousness, the goal being that we're transformed and we then go back to a spiritual type of body, if you will. It's just that I don't know what that...
Well, you could have a longing for instance, buried treasure.
Yeah.
And you could, slowly, first it's just sort of an idea or a theory, and then suddenly you find yourself reading a few books on it, and then you find out, okay, there's an organization in Florida, say, as an example, where an investor can get involved in a treasure hunt, undersea treasure hunt, underwater treasure hunt. And then you go on that treasure hunt, and maybe a person like that actually finds a treasure. So I don't want to disregard the longing that man has for some kind of immortality of some nature, of some continuity of consciousness, which is more oriented towards the Western, sort of combination of both the Western and Eastern modalities that we speak of, being absorbed totally into the consciousness of God, or being sort of a manifestation of God that has access to that consciousness.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I talk about balance, because I'm a seeker myself. I mean, this is why we're talking. This is why you asked me to chit-chat about Masonry. And so I will continue to seek, and I think you will too. Yep. My point is, do we really know?
Well, you don't know. And you see, the thing about seeking is that in Masonic terms, or in other terms like it, or Gnosticism in general, you have to theoretically hypothesize sometimes before you find, like that treasure I was talking about. But but I'll tell you what, we will return in just a few minutes, and you have promised me that you will discuss something called hermetic medicine that you've been working on for some time. Will you do that for me?
With pleasure.
Okay, we'll be right back. We are happy to provide our audience with two very exciting musical odysseys with Stephanie Slevin, a singer-songwriter from the United Kingdom. One is called Show Number 7, A Galaxy of Song, and the other is Show 21, I Talk with Angels, in our Threshold Radio archives in VegasAllNetRadio.com and YouTube. Here is one of our songs.
Goes around, comes right back around, but that's not true for me. They say what goes around, comes right back around, and that it comes in threes. Please bring me rest, bring me some peace, please knock on my door. And I promise I'll ask for nothing forever, evermore. And step into the light. Close your eyes, embrace me, feel tomorrow's end.
following is from West Side Warrior, the memoir of Ray Boylan, a Korean War veteran and crime fighter. He was there fighting in the world's coldest battlefield when the Chinese communists invaded.
Desperate squad members ran past our foxhole yelling, "Get the hell out of here! There's too many of them!" Again, we saw the Chinese soldiers charging in with opium-induced mindlessness, oblivious of our bullets. Again, we heard the bugles and whistles. Climbing out of our foxhole, Bob dropped 2 hand grenades behind us, and I threw one over my shoulder. Bullets whizzing by our heads, Bob and I became bolts of lightning flashing across the mountainside. Like a hideous film, desperate scenes like this played out on the Tokong Pass for 3 days. Sometimes I played in the scene. Sometimes I could only watch and wonder if it were real, or if I'd be suddenly jolted out of my trance by an RKO usher saying, "Hey, did you kids sneak in here?"
To acquire this book, Google westsidewarrior.boylan.kindle. Boylan is spelled Boylan. That's West Side Warrior, Boylan, Kindle.
If you like Threshold Radio, a program which deals with core issues affecting our personal, political, and spiritual lives, and advocates the creation of an enlightened, informed citizenry, not only in America, but throughout the world, then you might think of supporting both your product and business and our message by advertising on our show. All programs are archived and are supported in various ways, including social media, our outreach being broadcast weekly on VegasAllNetRadio.com, a very advanced internet broadcasting station, but also archived directly on our websites, on YouTube, and in SoundCloud. We believe in time we will have a very broad outreach. Through New Galaxy Enterprises, our parent company, we can create a wide range of marketing and advertising components to complement your advertising on Threshold Radio and increase your outreach in many creative and exciting ways. If interested, just go to www.thresholdradio.com and fill out a contact form with your interest. That's www.thresholdradio.com. We're back with the final part of Threshold Radio. Today we've been discussing the essence of true Masonry with Dr. Hugo Rodier, who is also, incidentally, a doctor of medicine, but also an author, and also a radio personality. Right, Doctor?
Yes, that's true.
Before we go into the really cornerstone of what we'll be talking about, something called hermetic medicine, let's just briefly talk about your radio show and tell the people about it and how to tune in.
Well, I've been on the radio for 15 years, and unfortunately, as we speak, in hiatus right now because of sponsorships. But you can still listen to recordings on my website. If you go to HugoRodier.com, there are some old recordings there. I hope to get back on the air soon.
Okay, that's good. Threshold Radio, we have archived all of our shows, and you can get them at thresholdradio.com. Archiving is a great way to listen to stuff because you can listen to it whenever you feel like it, instead of being forced to, sit down next to a computer or hold your phone for 45 minutes.
Right.
Well, let's talk about hermetic medicine. What is that, actually?
Okay, I call it hermetic health, which is a little bit different. You'll see.
I'm sorry I said it wrong. Yeah.
No, it's okay. But let me give you a little bit of background. I'm a bit of a rogue medical doctor. Even before medical school, because of all these esoteric studies, I felt that medical school was just a pharmaceutical mill where you're trained to prescribe drugs for symptoms. And of course, a whole lot of people are catching on to this idea. And for 30 years, I've been practicing integrative health, which means the sum total of what we're talking about, particularly nutrition. But at the same time, studying esoterica, and on the other hand, physics, I began to see that we were talking about the same thing. And you can pick up Scientific American and dig for this. I can give you the quote if I can have a minute to go find it. But
sure.
It turns out that physicists have been saying for over 100 years now that everything about the universe is energy and information. And I'm sure you know that. Well, guess what? The ancients knew this. And the Kabbalah tree symbolizes just that. Strength and wisdom. Strength being energy, wisdom being information. And there's a third pillar in the middle, because you need to balance strength and wisdom, above, below, male, female, inside, outside, dark, light, You need to balance those creative forces. And that's why the Kabbalah tree has a third pillar, and it's called balance or equilibrium or beauty. That's why people are beautiful, because they have balanced personalities and features. And so balance or equilibrium is the union, the transcending of these two opposing forces into one in equilibrium, and we do that as humans. It turns out that another word for balance or equilibrium is homeostasis, which I know where I'm going. You know where I'm going.
Yeah.
That's another word for health. Now tell me, what is a symbol for the medical profession?
Caduceus.
Exactly, which is two intertwined serpents around a middle shaft. And they're winged. These serpents are winged. Turns out that energy is symbolized by snakes, and birds symbolize wisdom. And so the caduceus held by Hermes, the god of balance, is a symbol of the medical profession. So what is the caduceus telling you? It's telling you about healing through energy and information, which is strength and wisdom, which is, Johnny, calories and micronutrients, energy and information.
Right.
Through nutrition, through understanding the forces of nature, male and female in balance, strength and wisdom. So these are all Kabbalistic hermetic concepts that have been rediscovered by modern physics. They call it energy and information. To me, the caduceus is an amazing symbol. And that's why my new book, if you will, is called Hermetic Health, where I show that everything in the universe, from politics, economics, anthropology, philosophy, religion, health, nutrition, it's all based on energy and information. And I didn't make it a book. I made it into a PowerPoint presentation because I've written 4 other books that nobody's reading. People just quit reading books. And so I figured I'd make a very loaded image-based PowerPoint presentation with minimal prose at the bottom. See if that sells better, about everything that we've been talking about tonight, Johnny.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important. Certainly, nutrition has saved my life several times. And partially was the way we met was because of seeking some help along those lines.
Yeah, I'm glad that you came into my office.
You see, I think that people who are seeking the answers through nutrition, as I had to, because I was actually cured of asthma because of it.
Absolutely. I see that all the time. And not only asthma, but just about every chronic condition.
But you know, everything is contextual. You have to figure out part of it yourself.
Exactly.
But without somebody who knows something, I certainly would have probably be dead by now.
Well, it's like what we were talking about. You know, we need coaches, we need avatars, but the real work needs to be done by us. Yeah. And that's a very Masonic concept right there, too.
Well, listen, Doctor, I really appreciate you being with us. And is there anything else you'd like to tell us about connecting with you if people need to?
Well, just check out my website. You know, it's HugoRodier.com, and it's HugoRodier.com.
Very good. Patricia Welch is clearly one of the most accomplished singers living today. Recently, she created a wonderful CD set called Great Entertaining, Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia. We have 2 complete shows with Patricia, show number 4, Evolution of a Singer, and show number 14, Cocktails with Patricia. You can find them at our Threshold Radio archives at vegasallnetradio.com and YouTube. Here is one of her songs, an absolutely amazing rendition of La Vie en Rose. This was originally performed decades ago by France's great singer Edith Piaf, who actually wrote this song. Thank everybody for listening, and we look forward to speaking with you all next week.
So, thanks for having me.
My great pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Des yeux qui font baisser la lumière Rodier qui sous perçait sa bouche. Voilà le portrait sans retouche de l'homme qu'elle a appartient. Quand il me prend dans ses bras, il me parle tout bas, je vois la vie en rose. Il me dit des mots d'amour, des mots de tous les gens, et ça me fait quelque chose. Il est entré dans mon cœur une part de bonheur dont j'ai connu la cause. Il a pour moi ma pluie dans la vie. Il me le dit, là j'aurai pas la vie. Et dès que je l'aperçois, alors je sens en moi mon cœur qui bat. Des nuits de mon plume finie, au grand bonheur qui pense au place, des émuis des chars s'effacent, horaire, on a mouru. Quand il me prend dans ses bras, il me parle tout bas, je vois la vie en rose. Il me dit des mots d'amour, des mots de tous les gens, et ça me fait quelque chose. Il est entré dans mon cœur une part de bonheur dont j'ai connu la cause.